Hello everybody, I'm here today to do my Read Around the World project video for Southeast Asia, and that includes Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Timor-Leste. So those are quite a lot of countries, but I actually don't have a lot of books for each of them, so I thought I will just put them in one video. So first for Burma, I read First I Erase Our Name by Habiburahman. Sorry if I pronounce that wrong, but this is a book about the Rohingya people. It's a memoir. It's a very short memoir of a Rohingya kind of fleeing away and how he was treated in his country of origin. He was always treated like he didn't belong there. He was not allowed to do certain things, and it was really the writing was not particularly amazing because he's not a writer per se, but I think the it was very heartfelt, and I think it was a good book to read. I think I should read more things from Burma because obviously there are other aspects of the country than just like how Rohingya people are being treated in the country. So I don't want that to be my only knowledge of Burma, but I think that it is also an important topic to discuss and to read about. So I'm not saying we shouldn't get familiar with that situation. It's just like maybe also explores other parts of the culture, but this is a good book, I think, to explore how Rohingya people are treated and how hard it is to be one of them in Burma. The next country is Laos, and for Laos I read Mother's Beloved by Outhine Bouyanvong. I'm going to butcher all the names, so I'm sorry. But this one is kind of a short stories from Laos, and it reflects the culture there and like certain cultural elements, which was very nice. And the short stories are good enough. I'm not particularly into short stories, so this didn't hit particularly hard or was particularly memorable, but it was a good book to read, and it's also very short again. Then for Thailand, I read Bright by Duan Wat Pimwana, and I have a full review of this, so I will link down below that review. But this is about a boy that is kind of abandoned by his parents, and so kind of the community around him takes care of him. So he has dinner at one different house each night, and they kind of make sure that he's fed and clothed, but obviously they don't quite educate him in the way that parents do, or like make sure that he goes to school and works in his classes, and you know, take care that he's emotionally stable. So this was a very interesting book actually, because it's on one side it shows the power of community and how this kid was taken care of despite everything, and on the other side it shows how important it is to have a family unit. So yeah, I think this one was interesting and it was well written as well. I think I will be interested to read more from this author. I know that they have more books out, so maybe I will take some of them some other time. Then for Cambodia, I read Year of the Rabbit by Tian Veasna. And this is a graphic novel about a family that runs away from a regime that was ruling there. I don't know exactly the timeline, but yeah, it was a coup, and so people ran away because they knew that they were not going to be welcome in the new society. And you know, they kind of ended up in sort of concentration camps almost. So yeah, a lot of hardship, a little bit on the same line as the book for Burma. There is a lot of those kind of stories in this area of the world, unfortunately. And yeah, this is another one of them in graphic form, so it's fast and easy to read. Yeah, I thought it was good, but yeah, I would love to find a book about a topic like that in this region that is like really reflective and really deep, because there is only so much reflection you can do on a graphic novel. So yeah, but I didn't know anything about what the novel was talking about, so it was still interesting to read, but it's I would have liked more depth. Then for Vietnam, I have read two books. The first one is The Mountain Sing by Nguyen Phan Que Mai. And to be completely honest with you, I do not remember anything about this book. It was very forgettable. Even when I was reading it, I didn't feel like it was nothing special. I know a lot of people love it, so if you are one of those people, I'm glad you enjoy it. But yeah, for me, it's not that I hated it or anything. I just thought it was fairly generic and I don't remember anything about it. And the other book that I have read from Vietnam is The Sympathiser by Viet Thanh Nguyen. And this one is, I also didn't love it, to be honest. It's about a man that translates for the Americans when the Americans went to Vietnam, and then when the Vietnam War ended and the Americans left, what happened to him, kind of. And this was, I don't know, it's not that the premise I didn't like, but the way it was written, it was very masculine, and I understand that was part of the point of the book, but I just don't enjoy reading those kind of books, and I don't enjoy reading about this person look into women as if they are objects, even though I don't necessarily think that's the view of the author, and it's probably as a comment on how Americans view Vietnam and especially Vietnamese women. But yeah, I just don't want to read about it. I just don't want to read those kind of stories. So yeah, unfortunately that also didn't work for me. If you know any Vietnam books that you think I might enjoy based on my likings, I would love to know. Then for Singapore, I have actually read quite a few books, well, 3 books, which is more than I have read to any of the other countries. The first one I read was Ponti by Sharlene Theo. And this one is about mother-daughter relationship, and the mother is in a movie, and it's like a cult movie, and it's kind of like the effect that has on the daughter. I thought the book was good. I think it was not necessarily for me because I'm not particularly into movies or cults, like not cults, obviously, like religious cults, but like cult culture, like following some series or some movie or some musician like really deeply. I'm not into those kind of things, so I'm not the right person for this topic, I think. But I think it was a very rich and interesting exploration of how that affects a mother-daughter relationship. Another book I read from Singapore was How We Disappear by Jing-Jing Lee. And this is about, I think it was Second World War. There was certain women from Japan and Singapore that were used as prostitutes, basically, for the soldiers. And it's a narrative that goes back and forth between modern day and the past, and the one of the family members of one of these girls kind of finds that about her. I think it was her grandmother. I read this a long time ago, but yeah, something like that. And so we have like the 2 timelines, and we go back and forth into the situation. It was a book that is designed to touch on your emotional chords, and it touched mine. So I think it was successful on that, but I don't think it was like particularly literary or reflective or deep, but still it was showing a situation and connecting with the reader about that situation. So in that sense, I think it did a good job. And the last book that I read for Singapore was Rainbirds by Clarissa Goenwan. And this is kind of like a thriller. I read it a long time ago and I don't remember all the details, but I think it was something like a woman goes into a mountain place because someone asked her to, and then weird things happen. It was okay. I don't particularly remember it being super good or anything. And I'm also not into like thrillery books that much, so yeah, it was okay. Then for Malaysia, I have read two books, both by Yangtze Choo, Night Tiger and The Ghost Bride. And back when I read Night Tiger, I quite enjoyed it, but again, it's one of those books that is designed to touch on your emotions. It relies on several stereotypes and plot points that are used over and over again and stuff like that. And partly The Ghost Bride as well. But I think The Ghost Bride was a little bit messier in the structure. But they are enjoyable books. I think that if you want to read something not necessarily lighter in the content, but lighter in the depth in which it goes and in the in what it asks the reader to give to the book, I think these are good books to read, because they are books that are easy to get invested in. They are books that show some culture of Malaysia, and it makes you explore other cultures without having to be in-depth conversation about the meaning of life. You know what I mean? So yeah, I enjoy them. I think they're good books. Then for Indonesia, I have read also a few books. I want to highlight probably the ones that people can access. So I have read Man Tiger by Era Kurniawan, something like that. I'm sorry. And this is kind of like Gabriel Garcia Marquez Chronicles of a Death Foretold. I think it's the author said that he based it on that kind of, but basically someone dies at the beginning and we kind of trying to figure out what happened. It's a very short book and it's like, I think I read somewhere that was also intentional. I think it's 5 chapters and they are exactly the same length, pretty much. And they are, going back, trying to find out what happened in this village where everyone knows everybody. And it is interesting because, again, it has a lot of cultural elements. It puts that kind of story in a very different cultural context. And there is this mythological man-tiger creature that is obviously thought that was involved in what happened, and it plays with assumptions and things like that. I thought the structure was messy and it was kind of difficult to follow at times, but that might also be because of cultural differences that it's not one of those books that are easily translatable, probably. So that also plays a role, but overall as a reading experience it was challenging, I would say. So yeah, it's a bit of a hit and miss for me on that one. And then the other one that I want to recommend is This Earth on the Making by Tetralogi Buru, and this is, if I remember correctly, it's like a memoir of an Indonesian man or child during the Dutch colonization and how horrible it was. I read this really long ago, like probably like 15 years ago or something, but I remember still not not the details, but I remember the feeling of being discussed about what the Dutch people did in Indonesia, because they were not great. And yeah, I think it's a good, if you're looking for something for Indonesia that is a bit more critical on the colonization side of things, I think this is a good book to pick up. I have also read Revolusi by David van Reyenbouck, which is kind of about colonization of Indonesia as well. I don't know if the author is Dutch or Belgian, but he is very critical of Dutch colonization as well, and in that book it does give a lot more background and history of the region anyway, but I don't know if it has been translated yet, but in the time that I read it at the beginning of the year, it was only available in Dutch and German, I think. So yeah, I probably many people cannot access this book. Then for Brunei, I read The Fisherman King by Katarina Mohd Dad, which is kind of a fantasy book about a boy that is kind of not very well regarded in the kingdom, and then he finds out he is supposed to be descendant from a king, the Fisherman King, and there's a lot of fantasy magic things happening with water and stuff. It was fine. There are some cool bits, cultural bits that I liked, but yeah, it's also nothing like magically special that I'm gonna remember forever. But yeah, it was fun. It was a fun book to read. Then for the Philippines, I have read two books. The first one is Bibliolepsy by Gina Apostol, and this is basically a book for readers. It's like a love letter to reading and books, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those books that you read just to feel good about something, and I think it will appeal to a lot of people in these kind of circles and of the internet, because it's again about the love of reading. So yeah, that one was nice. And the other one that I read for the Philippines was The Betrayed by Reine Arcache Melvin. And this is a book about mostly three people, two sisters and the husband of one of them, and they are kind of involve all their lives in the politics of the country, and there are different changes of power and things like that that affect their family directly because they are so involved in politics. And so we follow, it's kind of like a family saga, but not really a family saga, because it only follows one generation, but it follows the generation, mostly follows a generation, but family is a big part of that. So the father and stuff, the children are also involved. So yeah, I thought it was a good book as well. I enjoyed the reading process of it. I think that I was somehow expecting it to be more literary than it was, and I don't know why I thought that. But if I let off my expectations, I think it was a good book. I think it was very engaging, and it went into quite some details about the situation in Philippines, and I enjoyed that as well. So yeah, I think I would recommend as well. Then for Papua New Guinea, I read Mr. Pip by Joy Jones, and I know that this does not qualify for many people as Papua New Guinea because the author is New Zealander, even though the book is supposed to be set in Papua New Guinea. And yeah, I mean, I understand. I would love if anyone has recommendations for Papua New Guinea that I can read, but that was the only book I could find that was not ridiculously expensive about the country. So that's what I read, and I mean, it's clearly done from a white guy that just came from a place that was not this place, because it's about the girl from Papua New Guinea that is in her village, and she has a normal life, but there is like revolution happening, kind of. The rebels are everywhere, and they are making things difficult for everybody. And then there is this white man that decides to become the teacher of the children because nobody else can do that, and he reads Dickens to the children, and then this girl particularly connects with him and with Dickens, and so there's this whole story about the rebels looking for Mr. Pip when it's actually just like the characters of Great Expectations. And there's a lot of violence because of the revolution, and this book, yeah, it places itself like kind of the white savior trope, which I didn't love. So yeah, I can see why the criticism come from. The book itself was very easy to read and it was very engaging and all of that, but yeah, the position of the reading and the topics are not very comfortable. So yeah, you can take with that what you like. And then finally, for Timor-Leste, I read The Crossing by Luis Cardoso, which is about, it's about someone from Timor-Leste kind of traveling all around and missing Timor-Leste. And what I thought it was very interesting about this book was the way that it showed not only things about Timor-Leste or about the connection of this country with Portugal because it was colonized by the Portuguese, but also with, for example, other colonies from Portugal. Like there is this character travels also to Angola and looks at the similarities and differences of Angola and Timor-Leste and how they were both colonized and stuff like that. So there are some very interesting points in this book, and I think I'm glad I read it because even though it's obvious when you read it, it doesn't occur to me that obviously the different Portuguese colonies will be connected to each other and not just through Portugal but by themselves. So things like that I didn't realize are quite prevalent in this book, and I'm happy that I read it so that I could get a little bit more of those little points from the book. Again, I would love to read as many of these places. As you can see, I have only read one book, so I would love it if you have any recommendations for any of these countries. And until next video, bye!